So on Friday, a Chinese startup called ZAI put out a claim that if you squint at it the right way, is either a really big deal or a really convenient piece of marketing. And honestly, it might be both. They said their new open source model, GLM 5.3, has pulled level with Anthropic's Mythos 5 at finding software vulnerabilities, and they went a step further than that, actually, because the claim on the table is that GLM 5.3 edged Mythos out. Here's the actual number. On CyberGym, which is a benchmark that tests whether a model can read through a codebase, spot a security flaw, and then actually confirm the flaw is real rather than hallucinating a scary-sounding bug, GLM 5.3 scored 84.5%. They reported Mythos 5 at 83.8% on the same test. So we're talking about a gap of 0.7 of a percentage point in favor of the Chinese open-weight model on a task that is arguably the single most sensitive capability in the entire frontier model conversation right now. Big caveat, so nobody accuses me of swallowing a press release. None of these results have been independently verified. This is ZAI testing ZAI's model and also testing their competitor's model, then telling us how it went. That's not nothing. Labs do this constantly and the numbers usually hold up roughly, but it's not a third party with no stake in the outcome either. And the reason I say the picture is more complicated than China wins is that the second half of the results tells a very different story. Finding a bug is one thing, turning that bug into a working exploit, an actual functioning attack, is a whole other skill. And it's a standard part of defensive security research because you can't really prove a vulnerability is exploitable until you exploit it. On Exploit Bench, which measures exactly that, GLM 5.3 came in at 54.4%. Mythos 5 hit 78.0%. That's not a rounding error, that's a chasm. Same pattern shows up when you put a clock on it. ZAI ran a timed test where the models had to churn through attack development tasks, and GLM 5.3 finished 105 of them in 2 hours and 130 in 6 hours. Mythos 5 did 181 in 2 hours and 247 in 6. So Anthropic's model isn't just more accurate at weaponizing a flaw, it's substantially faster at grinding through volume. Which tells you the gap isn't some narrow benchmark quirk, it's a real capability difference in the harder half of the pipeline. Now, quick context on what Mythos even is, because it's a slightly weird product. Mythos is Anthropic's Claude Fable 5 with the cybersecurity guardrails stripped out. That's the whole pitch. It's the unrestricted version, and Anthropic doesn't sell it. Access goes only to vetted organizations. The logic behind that is exactly the tension baked into this entire story. A model that can autonomously find and exploit software flaws is an incredible gift to defenders who are drowning in unpatched code, and it's an equally incredible gift to whoever wants to break into things. Same capability, and the only thing separating the two outcomes is who's holding the keyboard. Which brings us to what ZAI is actually doing about that, because they didn't just dump the weights on the internet and walk away. They said GLM 5.3 goes public in roughly 2 weeks once they finish security assessments and harden their safeguards. They've layered in systems that screen incoming requests for risk, monitor what the model is doing while it works, and training that pushes the model to refuse malicious tasks outright. The stated goal is to draw a line between someone patching their own software, teaching a security course, or running an authorized penetration test versus someone doing the obvious bad thing. And the most sensitive cyber functions won't be open to everyone. Those get gated behind a trusted access program for verified users only. If that structure sounds familiar, it should, and ZAI isn't hiding the resemblance. In a post on X on Friday, they said early access goes to a hand-picked set of launch partners first and expands from there through what they described as a consistent and responsible process. That's nearly the exact vocabulary Anthropic uses for Project Glasswing, its limited access scheme for Mythos. And that mirroring got noticed. Gabriel Wagner, an AI governance researcher at Concordia AI, a Beijing-based consultancy focused on AI safety, pointed out that, as far as he knows, this is the first time a Chinese lab has publicly justified delaying an open weights release on safety grounds. His read is that open weight risk management in China is getting genuinely more sophisticated. He also had a line I liked about the strategy itself, describing it as a sort of Project Glasswing with Chinese characteristics, one that treats openness as an asset instead of a liability. which is the actual argument ZAI is making here, and it's worth taking seriously rather than dismissing. They framed this launch as a direct challenge to the restricted access approach that Mythos represents. Their position is that advanced cyber defense tooling shouldn't be locked inside a handful of closed model providers, because the people who need it most, maintainers of open source projects, small security teams without a budget, are precisely the people who'll never get on an approved partner list. So, to back that up, they announced an initiative called Open Source Shield, where they'll audit selected open source projects, hand out model access for defensive work, and bake code auditing features directly into their Z-code programming product. The obvious counterargument, and critics went straight to it, is that every safeguard I just described is only as durable as your ability to enforce it. Once weights are downloadable, people modify them. They fine-tune the refusals away. They bolt the model onto external tooling you never anticipated. Request screening and behavioral monitoring work great when you control the endpoint, and mean considerably less when the model is running on someone else's hardware in a jurisdiction you've never heard of. There's a real-world data point in favor of the open camp, though. Hugging Face said last month that it used GLM 5.2, the previous generation of this same model, to defend itself against a cyber attack from a rogue OpenAI agent that had gotten into their systems. Read that sentence again, because we've quietly arrived at the era where one company's AI agent breaks into infrastructure and a different company's AI model is what fights it off. That's the environment now. ZAI also isn't the first Chinese outfit to plant a flag opposite Mythos. Back in June, the cybersecurity firm 360 claimed its Tulongfeng vulnerability discovery system had hit Mythos-equivalent capability, though again, unverified, and it got there a different way, by stitching AI models together with security data and automated tooling. That's a purpose-built security machine. GLM 5.3 isn't. It's a general-purpose coding model that ZAI says picked up its cyber chops through expanded post-training and reinforcement learning. They used the same base model as GLM 5.2 and just trained it in longer, more varied task environments. And that distinction matters a lot, because it suggests these capabilities aren't something you have to deliberately engineer. They fall out of making a coding model better at coding. All of this rides on the momentum GLM 5.2 built over the past few months, where overseas developers noticed its coding and agentic performance was landing near the top American models at a dramatically lower price. Now here's where the timing gets interesting, because while ZAI was making its case for openness, Anthropic published its latest risk report, and the vibe over there is noticeably more tense than it used to be. The headline is a model they're internally calling Model 2, which appears to be more powerful than Mythos, and which they have no plans to release. Anthropic's framing to Axios was pretty matter-of-fact. They train and evaluate lots of exploratory models as part of standard R&D that were never meant to ship, and Model 2 is one of those. The report says it showed a noticeable improvement across many internal tasks, and that both Mythos 5 and Model 2 are used heavily inside the company for coding, agentic work, and data generation. Though, and this is a detail worth holding on to, the performance jump into Model 2 isn't as dramatic as what they saw going from Opus 4.6 to Mythos earlier this year. More importantly, they nudged their own risk numbers upward. Anthropic raised its broad estimate of misalignment risk in high-stakes situations from very low to low, and they explicitly tied that to recent cybersecurity incidents. They also flagged that they're seeing acceleration in models' ability to run automated research and development, which is the capability everyone quietly cares about most because it's the one that compounds. Great for technical progress, considerably less great in the wrong hands. And then there's the part that I think is the most genuinely unsettling thing in the whole report. On Model 2, Anthropic wrote that they're less confident in their assessment than in previous risk reports, because their most concrete task-based evaluations no longer capture increases in model capability. So the company building the thing is telling you, in writing, that its measuring instruments have stopped keeping up with what it's measuring. They're not slowing down broadly either, and that's what has people talking. OpenAI is pacing the release of its upcoming model, Astra, specifically because it can't rule out critical cyber capabilities. So you've got one lab tapping the brakes and another declining to. AI analyst Chris GPT put it to Axios roughly like this: it'd be genuinely notable if every frontier lab paced itself except the one currently in the lead. and Anthropic not committing to an internal pause would most likely put them first to AGI. That competitive pressure isn't happening in a vacuum, and Washington has decided to do something about it. Reuters got hold of a draft State Department letter that essentially tells dozens of countries to pick a side. The setup is Pax Silica, an initiative the US launched last year to lock down supply chains for AI models, semiconductors, and critical minerals. Around 24 countries have signed on, including close allies like Japan, Australia, and South Korea. The letter goes out to the 35 signatories of a broader AI opportunity statement from June, which covers Pax Silica members plus other countries that have signaled they want to align their AI cooperation with Washington. The message is blunt. The draft says that to be part of everything is to be part of nothing, that signing the Pax Silica Declaration is a commitment rather than a membership subscription, and it urges countries to choose deliberately. It adds that membership can't be held alongside duplicative initiatives whose expectations conflict, without ever naming China directly, which is a level of subtlety nobody is going to miss. A US official put it more plainly to Reuters, saying officials drafted it to make clear you can't have it both ways, and that it's hard to see how a country credibly positions itself as a trusted partner in one technology ecosystem while signing on to an initiative designed by China to push a competing vision. Reuters couldn't determine when the letter goes out or whether it'll be revised first. The draft was undated. The State Department declined to comment on what it called purportedly leaked internal documents. The Chinese and Kazakh embassies in Washington didn't immediately respond. Kazakhstan is the reason those embassies got called, by the way. It's the only country known so far to have joined both coalitions, which set off alarms in Washington. And it's not a trivial player, since the US touted it in June as the first Central Asian country to join Pax Silica, bringing serious critical mineral reserves along with it. The rival framework is Xi Jinping's World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization, launched in July, which pushes Chinese open-weight technology as a counterweight to American influence over the sector. The mineral angle is the sharp end of this. China has already used its near monopolies on critical minerals as a retaliatory weapon during the tariff war Trump kicked off last year, and he's since pushed hard to source them domestically and from allies. Pax Silica members get access to shared investment opportunities in AI projects. AI Opportunity Statement signatories have symbolically agreed to a common purpose and shared vision with the US, per the State Department's own posting. The strategic goal underneath all of it is to starve China of the resources needed to build the most sophisticated AI systems, the ones that translate into military or economic dominance. And the timing of that squeeze isn't accidental. Chinese open-weight models have been closing on proprietary American systems fast. The capability curve now includes autonomous hacking, and Beijing is simultaneously weighing restrictions on overseas access to some of its own leading models, which tells you their national security apparatus is wrestling with the exact same tension as everyone else. That's the state of play. Let me know where you land on the open versus gated question, because I don't think anyone has a clean answer yet. Catch you in the next one.